Thank you. Would you please be seated? Please welcome the Mayor's Chaplain, Linda Elliott, who will be saying prayers for us this evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a delight to be the Mayor's Chaplain for this year. Last year, the former Mayor chose an Anglican to be his chaplain. In past years, I too have been an Anglican priest and was ordained in our cathedral in 1995. However, since then, I've become a Quaker, which is how I came to know Councillor Alan Dowson, now our Mayor. He attends the Quaker meetings for friendship that he finds there, and also for refreshment of soul and sometimes of body when he falls asleep. The Quaker meetings are very conducive to this because we meet together in silence for an hour, unless anyone feels called to speak. We don't therefore have any set prayers for an occasion like this. However, as Quakers, we do have a phrase which is often used in our meetings when people are asked to hold in the light a certain situation that is causing concern. In the silence, we pray that the light will enter that situation to bring wisdom, peace, healing, or whatever else is needed. So this year, rather a change at the beginning of each council meeting, instead of said formal prayers, I'll invite us to be silent together for a few moments as we hold in the light the council meeting, all the matters on the agenda that need to be discussed, our Mayor as he chairs the meeting, the people of Peterborough whom you all serve as councillors, and any particular concerns that you may have. The light that is spoken of here is a powerful image that can mean many different things to us according to our faith traditions. At the end of the silence, I will simply say, thank you, friends, because Quakers are fond of the phrase, strangers are only friends we do not yet know. So, friends, I ask you to keep 2 minutes silence with me as we hold the things that are on our agenda in the light. Thank you, friends.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Welcome, members, those in the public gallery and those watching on live stream. Due to the heat this evening, I will not be wearing my robes. I'm happy for members also to remove their jackets. I will now hand over to Rachel Edwards to go through some housekeeping points.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, can all those present please ensure that all mobile phones are set to silent. In the event of evacuation, please exit through the doors on both sides of the council chamber and follow the council staff to the assembly point. As per normal rules, if you wish to speak, please ensure that you raise your hand and you'll be invited to address the meeting. The Mayor has confirmed that he's happy for members to remain seated when addressing the chamber. All votes will be taken by a show of hands while we review the electronic voting equipment, unless a recorded vote is requested, and this will be taken in the normal way. As per previous meeting, you have laminated copies of for, against and abstains on your tables. When we come to vote, please raise the correct coloured document to make the vote counting easier for the team. I will take each for, against and abstain in turn. There is also a points document. If you wish to raise a point, please raise the pink document and address the Mayor accordingly, stating which point you are raising. Finally, I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed, so please make sure that when you speak, you are using your microphone. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
No, Mr Mayor, there are no apologies for absence this evening.
Okay. Item... Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It appears Councillor Tyler isn't in attendance. I don't know whether he's due, whether he's late, but he's not here at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members this evening which are not already recorded separately on the individual register of interest? No, thank you. None. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of May 2022. I would like to move approval of the following minutes from the 23rd of May 2022. Mayor-making meeting, the annual council meeting, extraordinary meeting, subject to the correction of the voting figures for the appointment of committees and other authorities, which should read 0, abstain from voting for both the amendment and the final vote. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to second that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there no objections? I will take that as agreed. Agenda item 4 and item 5, Mayor's announcements and leaders' announcements. I'd like to make members aware of the Armed Forces Day celebrations taking place this weekend in the Cathedral Square, and would be pleased to see many of you there. There are no announcements from leader this evening, so we will move on to the next item. Agenda item 6, questions with notice by members of the public. There have been no questions submitted by members of the public to this meeting. Agenda item 7, petitions. Those presenting petitions this evening will have 1 minute to outline their petition request. Are there any petitions from the public? No petitions. Thank you. Are there any petitions from members?
No.
Thank you. Agenda item 8A, B and C, questions on notice. There's been 4 questions submitted by members this evening. I have also agreed to accept an urgent question this evening from Councillor Day, which has been published and circulated separately. Any questions have been published on the Council website and will be taken as read. Question 1 from Councillor Shaz Nawaz. Councillor Cole, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Shaz Nawaz in relation to energy rebate schemes?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Nawaz, for your question. The Council continues to work directly and with others to always secure the best possible funding for Peterborough and all of our residents, especially at this time of such difficult financial times. The Council continues to work directly and with others to always, I beg your pardon, I'm repeating myself. More specifically, with regards to the £150 energy rebate that you mention, I can confirm that Peterborough has been allocated £11,757,900 to make payments to local residents in accordance with the scheme. To date, £7,817,400 has been paid directly into bank accounts or credited to council tax accounts, with payments and credits being made every week to ensure those most in need receive this help as quickly as possible. From October 2021 to March 2022, the Council administered the Household Support Fund, which supported 7,822 individuals with food, fuel and essential supplies, as well as vouchers in the school holidays for those eligible for free school meals. The Household Support Fund was recently extended, which has enabled the Council to continue our holiday support with over 26,000 vouchers being issued in Easter and May holidays. A renewed £100,000 scheme for those not eligible for free school meals was launched on the 20th of June in partnership with Citizens Advice Peterborough and will give up to £50 support for fuel or food, as well as access to advice and guidance to maximise income. As well as this, we're on track to launch our £550,000 scheme for pensioners in partnership with Age UK on the 27th of June, which will support those of pensionable age who are in need with vouchers of £100. Additionally, the Council will work with the Local Government Association and the Society of Unitary Treasurers and collectively lobby for additional funding for the whole sector. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
May I remind councillors they do not have to stand for replying. Councillor Shaz Nawaz, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Coles, for your answer. But I don't think you've fully answered the question, because the question was, what representations have you made to government for further support? So if you could perhaps answer that question after I've asked my supplementary question. And my question is, I'm interested to know in the next 30 days, what 3 things you're going to do to support people with the cost of living crisis.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz, for your supplementary. I think perhaps in responding to the first part, I'd just remind you what's already being done by government to support people who are poorly paid or on low incomes. There's a £650 payment for all who are on means-tested benefits. There's a national insurance cut for low earners. There's a £400 off energy bills. There's £300 for all pensioner households. There's 5p off per litre for fuel duty, and as you've mentioned, the £150 off council tax, which supports 80% of the population on Band D or below. Now, that's a very big and very expensive package. If you put it all together, it really does look that a full-time worker on the minimum wage should be better off. If you look at median earnings of £29,000, such workers should be only slightly worse off. In answer to what I'm going to do in the next 30 days, if you'd like to write to me with any suggestions you have, I'd be very happy to receive them and put them into a response that I can send off on my behalf too. But as you know, with the Financial Sustainability Working Group, I'm very happy to work with you on any suggestions that you might have. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Question 2 from Councillor Yazin. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Yazin in relation to St George's hydrotherapy pool?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll defer this to Councillor Allen because it's in his portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Leader. I will stand, if I may, please, Mr Mayor. I can confirm to members that officers are indeed undertaking a comprehensive review of the options, including those put forward by the Labour Group leader. It's anticipated that their findings and recommendations will be presented to Cabinet in July. As portfolio, I can confirm to the Chamber I've not been idle on the issue of hydrotherapy provision in the city. I recognise that it's encouraging there is a proposal by a medical practitioner to open a new purpose-built facility, providing the service where it really belongs, namely in the health sector. And I'm conscious in the short term that users are left without a local provision. To that end, we are investigating an alternative option which would offer access to hydrotherapy in the city to those that need it. We are looking to trial use of the teaching pool at the regional swimming pool later this year so that it can be used for hydrotherapy, get it right? Okay, hydrotherapy requires a warm water pool with a temperature of between 32°C and 35.5. This, we have been advised in our exploratory discussions, could be provided at the teaching pool. I'll be able to tell you more when plans are fully developed. Be assured we will certainly be talking to the user group about the proposals as they develop in order to establish the practicality of the option and whether available times can be mutually agreed. I hope this will be a solution for people in our city who benefit from hydrotherapy and provide practical alternative facility. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Yazin, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Allen, for your comprehensive answer. So from the answer that you've given, it's quite apparent that we don't have a solution anytime soon. So can you please advise me on where the users of the hydrotherapy pool are supposed to go to attend and get the service that they need in the meantime, please?
Thank you, Councillor Yazin, and I share your concerns about the current availability of hydrotherapy in our city. I'm sure many of the users will indeed have made alternative arrangements at facilities around our city. But we are working, and indeed the officers are working, undertaking a comprehensive review of the options, included those put forward by the Labour Group leader, as I mentioned, and we will use every endeavour to facilitate the facility, wrong word, but you know what I'm saying, obtain the facility for users. So at the moment, I think that some people will indeed have made other arrangements, but we're working strenuously to find alternatives, and we'll have a better answer, a more comprehensive answer to your question with alternatives for the July meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Question 3 from Councillor John Fox. Councillor Steve Allen, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor John Fox in relation to the Lido?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Fox, for your question. We all agree that the Lido is a fantastic facility for our city, both architecturally and from the perspective of being a cultural and heritage asset. It was originally opened in May 1936, and the building was granted a Grade 2 listing in 2002. As well as being an iconic building, the Lido has provided fun and exercise for generations of Peterborough's children and families, and long may it do so. Now, to answer your question with the stats you've asked for. This year, the Lido opened in late March, one of the few venues which could do so in line with the government's COVID restrictions at the time. The weather was favourable, and the opening very well received with good attendances. The popularity was most probably in part due to the pent-up demand which built up during the COVID restrictions, but we wanted to understand if this was the case, so different ideas were trailed, including extending early morning swims and a full Easter holiday opening, all intended to enable us to understand the potential for longer seasons in the future and better use of the Lido throughout the year. The pool tanks had been refurbished over the winter months and had to be refilled immediately once finished to maintain structural integrity. Calculations showed that to keep the pool ticking over via low chemical dosing and water circulation, but not heating, would be more cost-effective than filling the tanks, emptying at the end of the season and refilling the pool in May. This meant that the commissioning phase was shorter and the pool ready for use earlier. The cost of the utilities to date is not yet known. Staffing costs were around 28k, inclusive of work carried out by the maintenance team and a proportion of the manager's time, which is split over a number of sites. Income was around 15k, which was lower than anticipated, perhaps due to a colder than average Easter and a short period of shutdown, which you have mentioned in your question. Indeed, as noted, the Lido did have to shut for a short period from the 3rd to the 5th of May due to pump failure within the plant room. Due to the age and complexity of the Lido, unfortunately, it's difficult to predict which piece of equipment may fail at which time. Be assured, at the end of the summer, a full review will be completed of the costs and visitor numbers throughout the season to help plan for future seasons. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor John Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, a quick one, Mr. Mayor. So what you're saying, your figures say that you lost 13k in 2 months, basically, and also you haven't given me the full costs, which I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, because that does concern me, because for obvious reasons, which I won't go into because I may lose my temper. So we'll leave it at that at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In any commercial activity, it's impossible to predict whether you're going to make money or lose money on a commercial exercise. If you open and people don't come, you don't make money. And that's how the Lido is. But it's a fantastic asset to our city, and the more we have it open, the better. If you want the additional costs that you've asked for, I will get information from the officers and report to you offline, Councillor Fox. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Question 4 from Councillor Shaz Nawaz. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Shaz Nawaz in relation to comments made about the combined authority mayor?
I'm not exactly sure the question said that, but I'll do my very best. So, yes, at the time, Mr. Mayor, I do think it was probably a fair reflection on the state of affairs at the combined authority, which is now well publicised. I would have thought Shaz Nawaz here would have not wanted to highlight this even further. But when taken in context of the Ernst Young letter, which was published recently, in fact, on the day of that meeting, I thought it was entirely appropriate because there are serious problems there. However, as I said at the public meeting, and I've said it numerous times, I will be doing all I can to help matters and get the combined authority back onto a sound footing, both financially and in governance terms. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I do, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald, for your response, although I am disappointed with that. I'll take the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to share the definition of basket case with members and the leader. And the definition is a person or a thing regarded as useless or unable to cope, or it's a country or an organisation that is in severe financial and or economic difficulties. With that in mind, Councillor Fitzgerald, do you think it would have been fair for us to sit here 12 months ago and call your administration a basket case? And more importantly, second part of the question is, are you going to make a clear undertaking tonight that you're going to be more mindful and careful with the language you use as the leader of Peterborough City Council?
In terms of the basket case, unable to cope, I would draw everybody's attention to this letter from the auditors, Ernst Young, which says the combined authority is at severe risk of being unable to cope and operate. So if your definition is correct, then my language is correct. I could have gone further, and there were other members that said worse in terms of their damning comments about what is going on there, and I am restricted in what I can say in order to keep confidentiality. But look, be assured that in my time at the Combined Authority, I have helped to bring millions to this council in what have been challenging and difficult circumstances. Those challenging and difficult circumstances prevail today. If you talk about this authority, okay, I would accept that months ago, before I set on the journey of bringing this council round, but later in the meeting, Mr. Mayor, we will hear how this council has turned a corner and that we are making progress. So that does not apply to us. And the circumstances in which we find ourselves on are one of financial. The combined authority not only has financial problems, but it has severe governance problems. These are well reported. So my comments are entirely accurate, and if you haven't read it, Councillor Nawaz, there's a personal copy of the Ernst Young letter for you, which talks about all sorts of manner of issues, and I suggest you read it and digest it. But I am doing all I can to help the Mayor and to help the board. I've just been in a meeting today. The Chief Executive was at that meeting. Very cordial, very positive. But there is a long way to go to fix the problems, so much so that they've voluntarily asked for help from DLUC now, and that hopefully will help to move matters on and bring state stability in terms of how that combined authority works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second part is what?
Be mindful and careful of the language.
I am mindful and careful of the language. What I'm telling you is I thought the language is entirely appropriate.
Have you two finished? Yeah.
I thought I had, but he reminded me of something.
Okay. Urgent question from Councillor Day. Councillor Simons, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Day in relation to the felling of the Breton oak tree?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Day, for the question. This has been a difficult decision, I must say. The damage already seen in the two properties clearly demonstrates that the houses have subsided. The monitoring undertaken to date shows a pattern of movement consistent with drying shrinkage of clay soils. All other potential causes have been dismissed, and thus the only possible cause is drying shrinkage associated with moisture extraction from the two oaks, trees T1 and T2 at the rear of the properties. The third expert report also confirmed the damage is probably caused by root-induced subsidence. In addition, we are aware that the zone of influence of the oak tree's roots beyond the two damaged houses, and thus further properties may be implicated in the future. This suggests that the problem may get worse, not better, and the corresponding financial risk the council is exposed to could increase. The privately owned oak tree T1 has already been removed by the homeowner. However, uncertainty has been expressed that without DNA analysis, it can not be conclusively proven that roots of oak T2 has caused subsidence to the nearby properties. The body of evidence is clear, however, that the balance of probabilities is strong that T2 is primarily cause of the now fully accepted subsidence. That such additional proof was not necessary or reasonable to obtain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Simons, for your response. The Council commented that there are 4 other houses which could possibly be affected in future. To minimise risk, they want to remove this ancient oak. Would the Cabinet member agree that felling an ancient oak tree to avoid possible risk is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut? If other UK councils took the same approach, many thousands of trees could be felled, removing carbon sequestration, shade, habitats and all the services provided by trees. Would he agree that money cannot possibly be a justification for this approach? And why does this oak tree need felling when costings as low as £36,000 have been quoted to put in root barriers? Why are the legitimate concerns of local residents being ignored? Thank you.
Thank you. The root barrier the insurance company have discounted root barriers, so we can't do root barriers. The only reason the ancient oak is to be felled is to remove our liability. I can assure you, if there was any way we could get rid of our liability without felling this ancient oak, we would have done. I can assure you of that.
Okay, agenda item 8D, questions on notice. There's been one question submitted by members of this evening to the combined authority representatives this evening. Question 1 from Councillor Sandra Bond. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Sandra Bond in relation to the reversing the cuts in the bus services?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to. Unfortunately, as most people know, the Manor Drive estate is currently inaccessible for buses as there is nowhere for them to turn around. Once the nearby development at Norwood has been completed and the Spine Road there completed, as the Combined Authority speaking, they hope then to be able to provide a service and improve the bus provision for residents in that area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sandra Bond, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Fitzgerald, thank you for your comprehensive reply, as usual. Should the leader agree with me that the establishment of a bus service for this development is well overdue and needs to be given the utmost priority to reduce any further delay? Thank you.
I could give you a very simple yes, but I'll do a little bit more. I entirely agree, and I think everybody in the chamber, so if we're not making this party political, I think we should all be doing what we can, councillors across the ward from all parties and cabinet members and anybody with influence to try and hurry along that development and try and get a better provision of services for that area, which is indeed sadly lacking at the moment. So yes, I agree with you.
Thank you. Agenda item 9A, the Cabinet Recommendations Council Climate Change Action Plan. Agenda item 9A is in relation to the Climate Change Action Plan and can be found in the agenda pack. Councillor Seresti, would you therefore like to move the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to move the recommendation to Council, and if you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words, if that's okay with you. Is it me or is it the mic? If I stand this high, can you still hear me? Okay, great. The Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, and we also committed to net zero, to be a net zero carbon organisation by 2030. Since then, we've made consistent improvements in carbon reductions from the 2018 baseline. Many of you sit on the multi-party group, so you'll have heard and know all about this. When we look at like-to-like emissions for the Council, we have reduced carbon footprint by 28% since we took the measurements in 2018. The actual calculation today appears to have risen. And it's not really risen, it's just because we've got better ways of measuring it and we've included more things to measure. If we to tackle the carbon emissions, 25 commitments have been made and proposed by this plan, and you will see them in the appendix. They're all there. I urge you, those who haven't read them, had a look at them, just have a look at the 25 commitments, but also have a look at where we are measuring our carbon usage. And it's really, really very interesting. They're two tables, ever so easy to read and very, very easy to understand. So I would recommend it to the Council, and I hope you're going to support it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Simons, will you second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to second the recommendation and reserve my right to speak later. Thank you.
Can I call upon any other speaker? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's the first time I've spoken at Council since you very kindly elected me as a Deputy Mayor. I would like to very much thank councillors for electing me to that role, to say I'm very much enjoying it and been attending a number of engagements in the town hall and in the wider community, together with my Deputy Mayoress, Alderman Bella Saltmarsh, who is unfortunately not able to be here at this particular council meeting. You may not be hearing as much from me at full council because I do recognise that the mayoral roles do need to be to some extent separate from party politics, but I did want to say a few things about the council's carbon management plan. I served on the council's cross-party climate working group for a 2.5-year period, and we were responsible for drawing up the council's first 2 carbon management plans, and the second of those is the one that you've been asked to approve. I'm really pleased that this group has now transformed from being a working group to being a full scrutiny committee of the council. I welcome this for 2 reasons. First of all, because it will mean that the climate emergency will have a much higher profile in the work of the council. But the second reason is it means that all the discussions that committee has about the really important issue of the climate emergency will from this point forward take place in public and not in private, as was often the case for the working group. I would just like, there's 25 points in the carbon management plan. I'm sure you've all looked at them in great detail, but I'd really like to particularly highlight point number 5, which says to develop a process in which the council's in the council's budget setting process, whereby spending plans are reprioritised to enable the council to better achieve its corporate objective of getting to net zero carbon by 2030. I'd just like to emphasise that getting to net zero carbon by 2030 is a key commitment in phase 1 of our corporate strategy, which also forms part of our improvement plan. We need to become a council where our budget is clearly geared towards delivering our corporate priorities, and reprofiling our budget in the way that is proposed could be a key part of that. But, Mr Mayor, in conclusion, we should also remember that the resolution passed by Council in 2019 said we want to get not just the Council but the whole of Peterborough to net zero carbon by 2030. That's a really ambitious commitment, and it will need significant action if we're going to achieve it. I think that the fact that 2 years later we haven't seen a draft of a citywide carbon management plan, I think, is concerning. There's only 8 years to go until the deadline, so I hope that is something that the Cabinet and all our scrutiny committees will want to address. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call upon Councillor Day?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We are pleased as Greens that, again, we're looking at adopting the Council Climate Change Action Plan. The Action Plan, as has already been noted, contains 25 commitments to reduce the Council's carbon emissions. We are delighted to note, as the report states, that since April 2020, the Council started to purchase electricity using a green electricity tariff for the majority of electricity meters. We're also pleased to note that carbon literacy training is continuing to be rolled out to officers and councillors, and that the council has procured a new refuse fleet of 23 vehicles operating on HVO fuel and 2 fully electric vehicles for garden waste. As Chair of the new Climate Change and Environment Committee, I'm delighted to announce that we have had our first and very long, 2-hour-long work programme meeting. That's because it was such a new committee. Many thanks to all the officers and councillors on the committee who attended. There was a very in-depth and substantial working programme which has been developed, and we will ensure, especially I as Chair, to work hard on this committee over the course of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simons, would you like to say?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just keep it very brief, actually. Yeah, I'm pleased to have taken part on the cross-party work.
Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've been waving frantically through the debate, but I think it's the downside of sitting at the back. if I may participate in the debate before summing up. I'm very pleased to see the Climate Change Action Plan come today. As a representative on the Working Party, I'd like to thank the officers Hannah Swinburne and Lewis Banks for really a fabulous job. And I would like to thank Councillor Nigel Simons for chairing that, because I felt he really was a really refreshing embodiment of cross-party working, who allowed all our comments and ideas to be listened and valued as equal. I do have a little tinge of disappointment at this plan this evening that it couldn't go further. I've read other councils' plans, and excuse the pun, I was a bit green with envy of what some others are managing to do, as this has had to be done with a zero cost, and other councils had the enviable position of having kept money in the bank for responding for such crises. But it's a start, and the Labour Group appreciate the travel in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers before I call on Councillor Simons?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robertson, for your kind words. Much appreciated. Like I said, I was really pleased to take part in the cross-party working group. It was really refreshing, to be honest, and I feel this is a positive step going forward. I'm just disappointed that I'm no longer on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this agreed? Yes? Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to agenda item 10. Questions on the executive decisions made since the last meeting. This is in relation to the record of executive decisions detailed on pages 59 to 68 on your agenda pack. The leader will introduce this item, and any questions will be answered by the leader unless he refers them to another member. I would remind councillors that they should ask questions on the decisions in the report. All questions should be relevant to the decision itself. Should I feel that any preamble is unreasonably long, I will instruct the councillors to ask their question immediately. Can members please note that once I have moved on, questions will not be accepted from the previous pages. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you please introduce the item?
Yes, happy to do so, Mr. Mayor, and I'll take the papers as read and move through as you direct. Thank you.
I will take each page in turn, and could the members please refer to the title or reference number of the decision when asking a question. Page 59.
No.
60?
Yes, Councillor Wigan.
Councillor Wigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is about the award contract for the cloud-based services. Once again, we're in a position where we're using special urgency for a renewal of an IT contract. This isn't the first time we've raised this, and especially given in the decision reasoning that it was on the forward plan from August. Can the Cabinet member assure us all that steps are being taken to ensure that our contracts are being awarded on a timely basis to avoid future use of special urgency? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Celeste had that at the time, so perhaps he'd like to comment on that.
Yes, I can assure my fellow councillor that those steps were taken.
Page 62.
Ooh. 61, I think.
61.
Yes. Councillor Hogg.
Yeah. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So my question is about the laptop procurement. I presume this is to replace Chromebooks. And the question I have is, what is happening with those Chromebooks? Are they being sold off, or could they be donated to schools for the use of for children to be able to use them?
Not sure that's related to the decision, but I'm happy to answer if we know the answer today. Marco, do you know the answer from that?
Well, certainly that was the intention, that was exactly the intention, was to make sure it went to people who needed them and children at school.
Thank you.
Page 63.
Ask Councillor Shirassi to turn his mic off. Councillor Shirassi, could you just turn your mic off, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
62 now.
62.
Sorry, I have got another one on 61, sorry. Is that okay? Is that permissible? So the question is to do with the waste street scene. I'm not trying to read my own writing here. Sorry. Has the 9 months, so it says that the decision was for 3 months from the 1st of March to the end of May. Has it now been extended until March of 2022? It seems like we're getting old news here, that's all.
I'm assuming you're referring to the Enfortis. Which decision, Councillor Hogg, sorry?
It's Enfortis, yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
You slightly confused me there for a moment. It's Councillor Simons will deal with that one.
Yeah, it's been extended for a further 3 months at the present moment.
Page 62. Can I? No. 63. 64. 65.
4. No, we've gone past that. Right, are you going to take it?
Okay.
Just this once.
Just this once.
Sorry, I need to get quicker. So this is just to do with the milestone award for £1.8 million. My reading of this is that this is essentially for us to put a case together, for a business case together for access to the university. It seems not long ago that we had a moratorium on this kind of spending. And it seems like the gates have been opened and suddenly we're spending money again, hand over fist. And can the Cabinet member please assure me that this is indeed needed, because it's quite a big ticket item?
As Councillor Hogg will know, he had a personal explanation of this yesterday, so yes, it is needed, and yes, it is a big ticket item, but things like this are big ticket items, and the proper process, due governance and consideration of the project would have been worked up and a business case approved for it, otherwise we wouldn't have taken it forward.
Thank you. Page 65. Yes. Councillor Shaz-Nawaz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is on the term amendment for the £15 million loan to Propertier. As I looked at this, it reminded me of Empower, and I'm sure it did to the Cabinet member. And what I'm really concerned about is we're now amending terms and we're giving more flexibility. So there's two things I need to know. One, why was the term extended in view of all the difficulties they're having with construction? And number two, what reassurance can the Cabinet member give to full Council tonight that this loan will be repaid in full, unlike Empower?
I'll do this in two parts if I may, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Coles will no doubt want to comment. One, I'm not sure what difficulties he refers to in terms of what he just mentioned. There's no difficulties. Construction continues and is set to finish on schedule. There was a recent announcement about that from the hotel themselves through the council following press queries. And it's very, very simple. As everybody will know, and Andy will comment further if I miss anything, we went through something called COVID, which has set back the construction timetable because of construction being halted. So a revised finish date, which I've been on record as saying was early 2023, which they hope to open in the spring of 24, was the reason. Now, in actual fact, it benefits us because the original money we were going to make in terms of return on the loan will actually be closer to £1 million when they fully repay it. And I would remind you also that the loan is fully secured on the property. Councillor Coles, have I missed anything, or do you want anything to add to that?
I believe there's a point of order.
Point of information, Mr. Mayor.
Such thing as a point.
The leader says that construction was halted during COVID.
I think there's no such thing as a point of information.
Okay, well, it's inaccurate because construction was not halted during COVID. Construction carried on up and down the country.
Statement of accuracy.
It's been publicised by the owners of the hotel that construction was delayed because of COVID. And I believe it was halted in some circumstances. But it's irrelevant anyway. The project was delayed because of COVID, not our words, the words of the construction company and the owners. Andy, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may respond, this is exactly the case. During the construction process, COVID measures had to be brought in place, which meant that fewer staff could work on sites, and that's why there was a delay in the completion. But there has been work going on. The issue around the risks, actually, we're far better off because we're getting more of the payment of the loan over the additional months. So actually, we're better off in terms of our financial position, and we're going to be fully paid off at the end of the process. And as you know, the topping off ceremony is not that far away. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Continuing with 65? No. 66? Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 items on this page. I just want to put my stakeholder into that. The first one is the first item on the new street cleaning vehicles, and I think that the blurb kind of gives an indication that there might be £31,000 looking to be spent on rebadging the vehicles or repainting the vehicles, and I'm trying to work out why we're spending £31,000 on repainting those vehicles. I think that probably needs to be looked at.
I won't steal his thunder, but Councillor Simons will answer.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. I can assure you the vehicles have been ordered in white. We will not be spending £30,000 on painting them blue. Yeah, we will be putting some stickers on them, but there will be definitely won't be resprayed. I can assure you that. That £30,000 has been withdrawn out of the budget.
Okay, sorry, my second question is the next one, which is the school buses, which is quite related. I just want to make sure we're not wasting money repainting those as well in the Aragon blue, like we've done with some of our bin lorries. Can the Cabinet Member for Children's Services please assure me that that's not the case?
Garland.
I'm afraid I can't assure you about the colour and what's happened to the fleet vehicles. I know all about the CMDN and why it happened, because they were beyond their economic viability, and we hope that by the time that comes to an end, before 2030, we shall be going in for electric vehicles. But probably Councillor Simons may know better than I when it comes to the fleet vehicle, the minibus fleet vehicles.
Yeah, I can confirm they will be standard white, not...
Sorry, and number 3, sorry, is just about the Citizen Advisory Bureau. I understand that in the budget we looked to reduce their funding, but that they were going to be giving a new home at the Town Hall. Can I just be assured that has gone through and is part of this 130,000?
That's not entirely correct. My colleague will give you the facts on both from a finance view if needed, but Steve, I think you probably know both the answers.
The funding was reduced because we provided a facility at Central Library. So this is less than we would have awarded because we did a quid pro quo by providing office space. Thank you.
Any more for 66?
Any more on 66? No.
67?
67 and 68? No. Yeah. Agenda item 11, questions on the combined authority decisions made since the last meeting. This is in relation to the record of the combined authority decisions details in the additional information pack. I will refer to any questions to the relevant combined authority representative. I would remind councillors that they should ask questions on the decisions in the report appendices. All questions should be relevant to the decision itself, and should I feel that any preamble is unreasonably long, I will instruct the councillors to ask their questions immediately. I will take each appendix in turn, and council members, please refer to the title of the decision when asking a question. Appendix 1, Audit and Governance. Appendix 2, Audit and Governance. Appendix 3, Overview and Scrutiny. Appendix 4, Overview and Scrutiny. Appendix 5, Combined Authority.
No.
Appendix 6, Combined Authority. No. Agenda item 12, Motions on Notice. Motions on notice can be found on pages 109 to 111 of your agenda pack. Motion 1, motion from Councillor Hussain. This motion is in relation to the City-Council of Sanctuary. Councillor Hussain, please would you move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I will take that members have read the motion. The motion is about recognising the work officers, charity organisations, people of the city and councillors do to support refugees who come to the city. Councils like the Foxes who have been working to ensure not only aid goes to Ukraine, but that people coming to our city are supported with help, finding homes, jobs, education and medical support. The benefits of being recognised as a city of sanctuary is that all the organisations that support the refugees work together to ensure a quicker integration, which leads to savings for the city as there is less demand on education, medical services, housing and benefits. The sooner people integrate, the sooner demands reduce and they begin to add to the economy of the city. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Allen, will you second the motion? And if so, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
I'm happy to second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Yeah. Can I call upon any other speakers?
Councillor Ali.
Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud to say, having lived in the city for 53 years now, we have challenges, but we have always been a city of sanctuary. We have welcomed people from different backgrounds over many decades, and people are settling in well, but nevertheless, we still have challenges, and we work through them. I was hoping to put an amendment to this motion. I thought it was quite a valid one, but my amendment was ruled out of order. Hopefully I'll come back on that one in a future meeting. But what I was referring to urge our government, which doesn't seem to be suggesting to us and many people in this country that it's a country of sanctuary. It spent a lot of money, people who are destitute, sending to Rwanda, not allowing them a legal way to apply for asylum. So I think we need to make a point of urging our government. It's fair enough saying that our city is a city of sanctuary. Our government, sadly, is making our country more and more difficult, and it is very selective in terms of who they allow in as refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Me. Did you mean me, Mr. Mayor?
I did.
Thank you. First of all, looking at the motion, it's obviously a very welcoming motion. If only all motions were like this, that encompass qualities of inclusivity on behalf of the administration. I'd just like to say that I have worked with Councillor Hussain and the Councillor Judy Fox and Councillor John Fox, who kindly invited me into the working group when the Ukraine crisis befell us. And what I'd like to say is, again, I concur with Councillor Ansar Ali's sentiments over here, and I'd particularly like to draw attention to the clause that states fact-checking and challenging anti-refugee and anti-migrant attitudes wherever they are found. What I guess I'd like to ask Councillor Hussain in his roundup is to address that very sentiment, that in the event that this motion is passed through, would he be willing to address those attitudes that are very much prevalent in government at this moment in time, that see a discriminatory approach towards refugees and not as a country of sanctuary? So we have to see consistency and have to see these attitudes follow through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. In principle, I do not have any issue supporting this motion, as it is a welcoming motion to refugees who are fleeing violence, persecution, and is also offering safety and sanctuary to them. However, it would have been appropriate and fully justified if the author of the motion had included a paragraph on the government's policy on asylum seekers' removal to Rwanda. As far as I was made aware, Councillor Ali wished to make an amendment to the motion by inserting a paragraph on the government's policy on removing asylum seekers to Rwanda, which was declined as it was considered too substantive. It is a shame when we are talking about persecution, fleeing violence, integration, welcoming new comers, that we ignore the removal of asylum seekers to Rwanda. Mr. Mayor, as you and the members will be aware, that the government is simultaneously arguing that Rwanda is a beacon of human rights and economic prosperity, and that removing a few refugees there will be so awful for them that it will deter others from following in their footsteps. This reality is that an unfortunate few are being punished in order to discourage the others. Mr. Mayor, the British record of forcibly relocating the poor and people of colour around the world is hardly a glorious one. Carrying this legacy into the 21st century is immoral, particularly when those affected are refugees. The fact that we have so far welcomed 70,000 refugees from Ukraine and 114,000 from Hong Kong on uncapped schemes, and at the same time as attempted to remove a few hundred to Rwanda, blows out of the water the idea that this policy is about our inability to integrate and welcome newcomers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and keep this brief. This is obviously it's a Conservative-led motion, and I think we fairly all agree that this is the sort of thing that we want to see in this council chamber, a good quality motion that addresses some quite serious issues. And so I'm hoping that because it's a Conservative motion, that all the members to my left here will be supporting that motion. I would also hope that all the members that do vote for this this motion think very carefully about their reaction to the government's current policy vis-à-vis Rwanda, and that you've got your conference season coming up, and I would hope you'd use that opportunity to feed back to your bosses that this is an unacceptable policy and it needs to be withdrawn as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Hogg. I'll try and be brief. I certainly echo the sentiments and the comments made by members on this side of the chamber. I look at this and I look at the first line. It says, Peterborough Council recognises the contribution that refugees and migrants seeking sanctuary have made to the city of Peterborough. I just wonder, with the government policy as it is at the moment, in 10 years' time, would we still be saying the same thing when refugees are being turned away and being sent to Rwanda? Now, I like this motion. I'm glad he's brought this. It's just that I just think that there's a discourse here between what's happening in this chamber and what that party in government are doing. So I hope that after this motion we write to the MP and ask him to then go back to government and say, can you please have a relook at your Rwanda policy, because we would not be saying stuff like this in 10 years' time if that policy is allowed to proceed.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil. May I call upon Councillor Yazin to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll also be very, very brief. As Councillor Jamil has quite rightly said, and I do echo everything that has been said, but I just wanted to add, and hopefully Councillor Hussain can answer this question of mine when he sums up. So at one point in his motion, he says fact-checking and challenging anti-refugee and anti-migrant attitudes. Wouldn't that be perceived as hate crime and potentially out of our remit and something that the police would potentially look at? So that's just something that kind of niggled at me a little bit as to whether he's asking the council to do something that might potentially be out of our remit. Thank you.
You wish to speak?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and some of the comments I wanted to share have already been shared. Of course, like all members who've spoken and those who haven't, we all agree with the sentiments of this particular motion because we are all welcoming and we all want a diverse city because we know the benefits that adds. And without spending too much time on immigration, what I found interesting, and again, Councillor Hussain may want to take, comment on this at some point, is that the Home Secretary said that under her own immigration policy, her parents probably wouldn't have been able to relocate to the UK from Uganda. So that's quite interesting. You talk about Syria here, but I remember many years ago, we had to fight very hard in this council, and it was Councillor Richard Ferris, in fact, who put forward a motion to persuade members to allow a few Syrian refugees to come into Peterborough. So let's not forget that. But there's a point you mentioned which is close to my heart, and you said, and I paraphrase, something like migrants or refugees or those who come into Peterborough, okay, contribute to the economy of the city. And I agree, by the way, you're right. But I'd like you to take that message back to the Home Secretary and make it known to her that those people not just contribute to the city, they contribute to the UK economy. So maybe she can take a view on that, because the Conservatives are obviously the champions of the economy. They're the champions of finance. They're the champions of taxation. So you should be welcoming refugees because you clearly recognise that they add to the economy. So perhaps you could give me that undertaking, Councillor Hussain, when you sum up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and I genuinely will be brief. I hope before this gets up to the hallowed portals of central government, it has the full and unequivocal support of Councillor Hussain's fellow councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else to speak. May I call upon Councillor Jackie Allen? Will you second the motion?
No, just exercise your right to speak.
Sorry. Second.
Yes,
Well,
exercise your right to speak.
yeah. Would you care to exercise your right to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to keep it brief. When Councillor Hussain and I explored this, bringing this motion to council, we spoke to people in the community. Moes Natu from Parker, who has the massive amount of empathy for refugees and immigrants in this city. He's a role model, and if you take it back to what does sanctuary mean, it's really bringing it back to being human in this city. We just want to recognise what we're already doing in this city. Schools are taking this on. They're having safe spaces in schools, in libraries, and we want the children of the refugees to feel safe and to bring back to their parents who have left their place of birth and will need support from their children. We need to recognise what the children are contributing to this city too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain, would you like to sum up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it, again, very simple and brief. Firstly, you know, this motion is about, as I said, recognising the work that people do in this city. This country has been a country of sanctuary for many years, so has this city, you know, whether it was migrants from further afield, you know, from the 60s after the war, to Polish migrants, Italian, even, you know, from Asia. So the country has been a country of sanctuary. The issue I have with colleagues, you know, across on the other side is that they are confusing this with, you know, there's two different issues that they've mentioned. One is about people coming here legally through the proper channels, applying for a visa, you know, being vetted and coming over as refugees, escaping, you know, war zones, and then the support that we are offering them. The other one, when they're talking about Rwanda, that is a national policy at the moment, and that is to, you know, hinder people, hinder the people traffickers bringing people to our shores who are not vetted, who are illegal, who we don't know where they're from, and you know what their history is or what their intentions are. So there's two different groups of people, and so I think they've, you know, that just simply sums it up from that. They've totally confused the situation just to make a political point. You know, we're talking about the people that are coming over here legally, not illegally.
Agreed? Agreed. Yep.
All agreed.
All agreed? Yeah. Motion 2, motion from Councillor Shaz Nawaz. This motion is in relation to the Luck East Regional News provision. Councillor Shaz Nawaz, please would you move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
I understand, Mr. Mayor, that the motion is agreed, so if that's the case, we can move on to the next motion.
Unless you need a proposer and seconder, then we can move on.
It needs to be proposed and seconded.
Yeah. A proposer?
Nick, you happy with that?
Yeah.
Seconder?
Yes, that's fine by me, yeah.
Yeah. And
Is everyone agreed?
is everybody agreed with that? Yeah. Okay. Motion number 3 from Councillor Jamil. This motion is in relation to the definition of Islamophobia. Councillor Jamil, please would you move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have pleasure in moving this motion. I'm sure people around the chamber have read this, and also, if they can, I referred people to the briefing sheet that came with it from officers, which sort of took away some of what I was going to say. This city is very proud. The Muslims of the city are very proud of the role that they play, and whilst they play that role, there is still discrimination that goes on. What I'm asking for here is a recognition of a definitive definition of what Islamophobia is. Now, while the drive to tackle the hate and discrimination in all its form continues, there have been some disappointing normalisation in the media and, in some cases, politics in the forms of hate in recent times, Islamophobia being one of them. As a diverse and vibrant city, where Muslims make up over 15% of the population, it's important that this council signals its seriously in tackling all forms of hate and discrimination against residents and members of the wider society, and in this case we ask for the recognition of this definition of Islamophobia. and I recommend this to the Chamber today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shaz Nawaz, will you second the motion? And if so, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
I'll reserve my right to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hussain, I understand you have an amendment to this motion as set out in the additional information pack. Please, would you move this now?
As read, Mayor, I just want to say I thank Councillor Jamil for bringing forward a motion on Islamophobia. I have personally been affected by incidents of Islamophobia, so it's an important issue to me personally, as it is to the 20,000 Muslims of our city. But as elected representatives, we have a duty to do the best by all the people of the city we represent. By that, we must ensure that a universally accepted definition is used, which is accepted by everyone, a definition which can lead to prosecution of those who promote, instigate and perpetuate Islamophobia. This definition falls short. As in the notes provided by officers, it states that the National Police Chief Council, NPCC, doesn't accept this definition. There is no consensus on a definition yet, so it is premature to back a contested version. I've spoken with our Member of Parliament, Paul Bristow, who informs me that the APPG on British Muslims have a meeting next week with the ministers about a definition. We should be engaging with him and supporting his efforts so that he can in turn next week turn around and say that Peterborough councillors are behind him. The government can, and I am sure will, engage with the APPG definition. If they do, it will be down in a small part to him. Finally, members will remember this council agreed it would adopt the government's definition as put forward by the APPG as soon as that is adopted by the government and partners. So I ask that this be referred to the Constitution and Ethics Committee for further consideration where they can, and also engage with the MP. Thank you.
Councillor Rangzeb, will you second the amendment? And if so, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do second it. I reserve my right to speak later.
Can I call upon any other speaker on either the motion or the amendment? Councillor Jamil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I object to the alternative amended version, and I'll do that for two reasons. Firstly, we've been here before. Back in February 2020, we asked for this council to accept the definition, and we were told then that the all-party parliamentary group and that Imam Qari Asam MBE, who's deputy chair of the anti-Muslim hatred working group at the time, was going to be leading a group of like-minded people on working on a new definition.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Jamil, it's not actually your, as a mover of the motion, you need to speak at a different stage. If you don't mind, we'll come back to you later.
Can I not speak against the amendment?
Councillor Kayham's next, I think.
I take it that means no. I said, can I not speak against the amendment? I'm asking a question, please, Mr. Mayor.
So you sum up at the end. You've moved your motion, yeah.
For the voting on the amendment.
Speakers, aren't we?
Let's go for Councillor Kayham.
Yeah, Councillor Kayham. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a few points about why I think I'm unable to support the amendment. The amendment actually stipulates that the working definition of Islamophobia was devised by the APPG of British Muslims in 2018. We have the amendment then goes on to say that MP Paul Bristow. Are you okay for me to continue? Okay, it's okay. That MP Paul Bristow, the co-chair of the APPG of British Muslims, have accepted a working definition. Now, the definition was actually devised in 2018. The MP was not chair of the committee at the time and was evidenced in 2019 at the general election hustings at not willing to accept the definition of the APPG definition of Islamophobia at the time that was hosted by Salam Radio in November 2019. So it's actually ironic that the amendment, in all honesty, seems to be factually incorrect when the current government in situ has not accepted the APPG definition of Islamophobia. So there are some discrepancies there. My question that I hope that the councillor is able to round up in his speech is that the MPCC states that the definition is too broad to be effective and is a hindrance to free speech. I would like to know what the makeup of the committee is. I obviously am aware that the amendment carrier, the councillor, is actually Muslim, and that what you actually mean by a hindrance of freedom of speech, when actually that aspect isn't applied to any other forms of definition of discrimination towards faith groups. So I would like these questions to be answered, and it is for this reason I will not be supporting the amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Jamil, I just wanted to clarify why I wasn't letting you speak at that time. So if an amendment is moved, the mover of the original motion has the right of reply at the close of the debate on the amendment, but may not otherwise speak on it.
Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You will be.
Fundamentally, when we have motions, they come in two parts. So the first part sets out the reason why, what is happening, or to do with some sort of background, and then the second part talks about what the mover is essentially asking council to do about this issue. All I can see with this amendment is the fact that the second part of this motion has quite literally just been crossed out. There is absolutely nothing left of the second part of the motion. Now, I'm advised that it is perfectly legal that this should be done, but when you kind of consider just tonight the motion that was put forward by Councillor Hussain and the amendment that was trying to be put forward by Councillor Ali was rejected as taking it away from its current form. I just feel that maybe that there's an element here that there's one rule for one and another rule for another, and I'm not saying it's illegal. I'm just saying that it just doesn't look good, and I think that we need to maybe have a think about how we allow amendments to motions. So from my point of view, I'm not going to support the amendment on the basis that I just feel that this is, it's brought party politics into it. A nice little advert there for the MP about the work that he's doing. Seems to be a general scheme in these Conservative-led amendments. And so, yeah, so I'm more than happy to support the unamended motion, but I will not be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Shazarwaz? I believe you've indicated you wish to speak.
Am I able to speak, Fiona, even though I'm seconding the initial motion? Just so we're clear?
No, sorry. Put your hands up the wrong order. Sorry? He can. Yeah. Well, let me just check standing order. At the end of the debate on the amendment. Oh, yeah, so you choose either now or at the end of this section. So if you want to speak now, that's fine, but you don't get to speak again.
If I only get one bite, I'll have it at the end, Fiona. Thank you.
That's what I thought.
Okay. Speak.
Colds is the next one. Colds.
Cold. Is that right?
Colds.
Yeah. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did you say I could speak at this moment? I didn't quite catch that. Thank you very much. I just want to be very practical about why the amendment's been brought in. I've investigated hate crime myself and dealt with some pretty nasty people on the extreme right wing in my past. The last thing you want to introduce is a law that's not enforceable. And the trouble is, if we act too soon and accept the APPG definition as it stands without the chance to consult further with police, we will end up with poor law that won't be enforceable. The last thing we want to do is to be supporting something that can't be enforced, because that makes a mockery of the whole system. So let's just be very practical about this. If you want to deal effectively with racism, with Islamophobia or any other form of abuse, it has to fit within a legal definition that can go through the court. And what this one doesn't quite meet is the test about what represents fair criticism of something and what is de facto offensive. And this is the sticking point of the whole process. I'm very hopeful as the process goes forward with the APPG that this will be ironed out with the police advisors. But I know only too well how poor it is to come up with something which doesn't have clear and authoritative legal definitions. So I would support the amendment and not support the original proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I call upon Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to follow up on the point made by Councillor Hogg, actually. So, it's important that our motions have a piece at the bottom which talks of the actions we seek to do. And the 2 bullet points there, I'm very surprised to see that someone would choose to cross out, continue to prioritise tackling hate crime and Islamophobia. I mean, surely we're all committed to that. Perhaps the second sentence in that bullet point, you felt you didn't want to do it under this definition, but to say that we want to take out the words continue to prioritise tackling hate crime and Islamophobia is quite a surprise to me. I don't know, just a bit sloppy with the pen, but I fear that this amendment, as Councillor Hogg has said, guts the true intent of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Call upon Mr. Dennis Jones, Councillor.
Thank you. What more can I ask? Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I just feel that there's an element here of kicking the can down the road, leave it to the MP, and there's obviously a lot of disaffection here. I think we should take matters into our own hands with this particular motion, and as we did with Councillor Hussein's motion, we can be critical of it, we can look at it, but as you say, I think there's just a little bit too much black ink over it for my liking, and I would like it to go through as is, please, but again work with the MP where necessary to ensure that that what we're saying here is carried through again to the hallowed portals of the House of Commons. Thank you.
Councillor Imtiaz Ali, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that I think this particular motion is very, very important to both sides of the fence here, and the amendment being made is made with good grounds. They believe that this is good grounds. But I would like, I'd like to tell these two proposers and seconders that the reasons that they're giving for this not being a good motion to present is around the legality of it and whether or not you can enforce it and what the NPCC have said. But I have to remind this chamber that in 2019, Councillor Walsh, I believe it was, brought a motion on anti-Semitism, and that was a non-legally binding motion, and it consisted of 4 lines of text. Here we're talking about a definition which is 2 lines of text, and it was supported by the opposite side. It was actually voted through. So my question is, why is it good enough for us to vote through a motion on anti-Semitism when this definition is shorter, it's sharper, it's more accurate? Why do we need to rely on a legal framework before we vote through a motion on Islamophobia? Thank you.
If there's no other speakers, Councillor Hogg, did you scratch your nose or? Thank heavens. Yeah. If the seconder of the amendment reserves their right to speak, Councillor Rangzam, would you like to exercise your right to speak as a seconder of the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to speak on this. Firstly, I would want to thank Councillor Jamil for bringing our attention to this critical issue, which is Islamophobia. I myself have faced it firsthand, so there's no denying that Islamophobia is there, is live and kicking. It's just a matter of defining the Islamophobia. That's where my issue and concern is. Obviously, APPG did come up with a definition in 2018, which is still sitting where it was. So it's a matter of trying to get on and move forward in one way or the other. I was just trying to engage our MP, Paul Bristow, who has been at the forefront of addressing the Islamophobia. For that reason, I encourage my colleagues to favour this motion. It will be one step forward in the right direction. Thank you.
Councillor Shaz Nawaz, would you like to exercise your right to speak as the seconder of the motion?
The amendment.
On the amendment.
Of the amendment.
It's
Seconder of the amendment. Oh, no, sorry.
it's a motion, I think.
I'm reading the wrong stuff.
Yes?
Read the wrong line. Yes, that's right. So.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think it's very safe to say it took NASA less time to send 2 men to the moon than it will take the Conservatives to define Islamophobia. It really isn't that difficult to define words, looking at what mankind or humankind has achieved since day one. My difficulty with what you've said, Councillor Hussain, is in your previous motion you were talking about political point scoring. And if I take your mind back to Imperial Britain, when in India we had tea boys and tea makers for officers, okay? And when I look around the country here sometimes, I see those tea boys and tea makers. So my advice to you would be, please stop being a tea boy and tea maker to Paul Bristow. You are better than that. You should be supporting this motion because you fully understand how important this is. You tell us and you say to us, you are a victim of Islamophobia. Yes, you are. I'm sure many others are here too. You know that the Conservative government sacked Imam Qasim for expressing freedom of speech. He has shared a view and they said this isn't good enough, you can't be free, you can't share a view, you're out. Your leader calls women in burqas letterboxes and likens them to bank robbers. How can we ever expect your party to come up with a definition? Because you know, this is all dithering and delaying because they don't give a damn. And you, Ishfaq Hussain, really, Councillor Ishfaq Hussain, are better than that. But what you've done here is you've watered down this particular motion, hiding behind party politics, playing the good boy, and just messing about with something which is very important to you. I know it is, because you and I have had conversations about this, generally speaking, and everybody knows your sentiments, so it's not a secret per se. You should have fully supported this motion and then said it should go further and put a deadline. And what you've done is talk about the APPG which sits there, and I'm not party to their conversations, but they've taken quite a few years and still have not come up with a definition. So really, you should be really better than that. But the motion that Councillor Jamil has put forward, and it has come to Council before, Mr. Mayor, makes good sense. It's important. As Councillor Hussain said, we've got 20,000 plus Muslim people in Peterborough, the majority of whom will say to you at some point, okay, they have been victims of Islamophobic attacks. In fact, Councillor Hogg was with me when I was attacked a couple of days ago. We're still not too sure who was being attacked, but I think Councillor Hogg concedes it was me because the guy was quite polite when he was attacking us, and I said if he was attacking you, Councillor Hogg, I'm sure he would have been much more harsh. But to come to the point, I think Councillor Jamil puts forward a good motion. It should be supported, and then if people have ideas on how it can be further strengthened, then we should be lobbying the government to say don't take weeks, months and years, because we're all victims, and if they really care about the victims, they should do something about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Jamil? Would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. it's odd that, you know, the mover of the amendment says I've been a victim and yet waters down the very line that says continue to prioritise tackling hate crime and Islamophobia. You know, how do you take that out? That is the one line that actually is a doing line. It actually instructs us, the police, or whoever the agencies are, to actually accept the definition and say, actually go out. If someone does it, then do them. Whereas if I accept the amendment, it is now saying, don't do that. And I can't accept that. We've had the situation where 2 years ago we were told the Imam Qari is saying he's going to come up with something. 2 years, he's done nothing. No help was given to him. He was promised help with his task force, nothing. And in the end, after 2 years, he gets sacked and he has to wait for the media to tell him that he's been sacked. That, to me, tells me the seriousness of which the way the Conservative government are treating this subject. Therefore, I am unable to accept the amended motion, and I would urge everybody to reject the amendment and vote for the substantive motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jamil. We will now move to a vote. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you. Councillors, we're now voting on whether to accept the amendments submitted by Councillor Hussain. So it's all those in favour. It's your green cards, if you can raise them, please, for the team to count. Thank you. All those against, it's your red cards, please. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. The result is 26 in favour, 31 against. There was 2 abstentions. Therefore, the amendment is defeated. We will now move to vote on the motion as originally moved by Councillor Jamil. All those in favour, please. It's green. All those against, it's red, please. Any abstentions? Thank you. The result is 31 in favour, 22 against. There were 6 abstentions. Therefore, this is agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 13A, consultation to change the scheme of elections. Agenda item 13A is in relation to the consultation to change the scheme of elections. Councillor Cole, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I bring this recommendation to Council that we agree to begin a consultation on changing our election scheme from the current system of thirds, and for those who aren't anoraks and understand this, and perhaps for the benefit of people who are watching, this means that we have an election 3 years and then a fallow year, and each of those years you elect 1 councillor per ward, which is our current system. The suggestion is that we move to an all-out system, which is like a parliamentary system, where we have one election every 4 years, where everybody is voted for. So for most of our wards, that's 3 councillors would be standing every 4 years. The reason this is before us is that it's been advised through the external assessment review when the governance report, which was commissioned by DLUC, asked us formally to consider that we change our electoral process. The report explains the many reasons for moving to this 4-yearly programme, which they say 2/3 of councils currently use anyway, and cite a whole number of benefits: avoiding short-termism in council decisions, for example, stability in council leadership, more engagement by voters, better collaboration over budget setting, and also cost savings of about £200,000 per annum. It also highlights the benefits of the current system of thirds, such as stability of councillors, avoids sudden changes in council leadership, for example. It makes local councillors more accountable, and it does assist the smaller parties being able to field sufficient candidates to stand at election. So the 2 recommendations are to agree that we start this consultation process, and then we look at whether it's going to be for 2023 or 2024 that we should, if we do agree, to move to this particular change. I so present this report, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Fitzgerald, will you second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
Can I call upon any other speakers?
Judy Fox.
Judy Fox.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point. I noticed that looking through the list of consultees, there are a number of parish councils listed, but Warrington Neighbourhood Council is not on the list. I realise that Warrington is not a parish council, but the Warrington Neighbourhood Council is considered like one. I would like to ask if they could be included, please, in the list of consultees. Thank you.
Councillor Coles.
Councillor Cole? Or is it Councillor Hogg?
No, Councillor Coles to respond to that just very quickly.
Would he not do it in his summing up?
I'm very happy to respond now if that assists, Mr. Mayor. There are statutory consultations in the process, and then anybody else can be involved as well. So that there's no limit on who can get involved. So Warrington Neighbourhood Council would, of course, be able to get involved in the process. I hope if that assists, Mr. Mayor.
Call upon Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to go to the ins and outs of you know, the different systems and what the pros and cons are, other than to say that the Liberal Democrat position currently is one to maintain the status quo. However, we are minded that this was something that was agreed with DLUC, and that we're more than happy to support this motion so that the review can take place. But once the review takes place, we will be fielding a robust defence for the status quo. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald?
Would you like to exercise?
No, I didn't say anything.
Would you like to exercise your right
Sorry, I wasn't aware there was no more speakers. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I have no further comments to make, and I might suggest we might want to move to the vote, as Councillor Coles has answered that question.
Councillor Coles, shall we move to the vote?
Would you like to sum up?
If you would, please, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed? Bloody thing. Yeah. Agenda item 13B, report of the Peterborough City Council Independent Improvement and Assurance Panel. Agenda item 13B is in relation to the Independent Improvement and Assurance Panel report. We do have a chair of the Improvement Panel, Eleanor Kelly, with us this evening. Should members have any queries for her, I'm happy as the Mayor for Eleanor to respond to these this evening. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
I would, Mr Mayor, and I also would like to extend a welcome to the Council Chamber tonight to Eleanor Kelly, who most people have met, and of course she's here hopefully for the duration, because I don't think it will be too long. But I'll say no more for the time being, except take the report as read, Mr Mayor.
Second the recommendation, and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate.
Indeed, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second and reserve my right.
Any other speakers?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Oh, damn.
Councillor Day.
Councillor
Day.
Day.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We welcome the fact that the Improvement Panel can see that we've turned a corner in terms of financial sustainability, and we as Green maintain our commitments to attending and contributing fully on the Financial Sustainability Working Group. We welcome the ongoing work that was based on a series of recommendations which require a change in governance, and that the panel recognises we are making progress with actions on governance and cultural change, although we must work on putting these changes into practice. We also welcome the early moves by the Chief Executive, as does the Improvement Panel, to establish dedicated transformation and programme management capability under his direct leadership. We also recognise that there are still significant risks that need to be managed, and we will do our best to help ensure those potential risks are tackled effectively. Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed?
I think we're all agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. Agenda item 13C, establishment of a joint Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health and Wellbeing Board. Councillor Howard, I understand you would like to move an altered version of the recommendation with an updated membership. Is there no objections to this? Would you please like to move the altered recommendations?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I would like to propose an alteration which relates to section 5.3, if I may, please. I propose an amendment that an additional elected member join the board, and this will be an opposition member, and this will ensure the spirit of the collaborative approach of the joint board. Thank you.
Who is in there? Next is Councillor Howard.
Hussain.
Councillor, yeah. Councillor Hussain, would you second the altered recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later in the debate?
Thank you, Mayor. I second it and I reserve my right to speak.
Can I call upon any other speakers?
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I just want to make the point that the way this has come to council is I think can be agreed as not being has been slightly suboptimum. We really need to make sure that these papers are brought to full council in a proper manner with everything with all the ducks in the row. This has been a little bit lastminute.com. I'm more than happy for our group to support the amended form. We did a lot of work to get to that point. Well, not a huge amount of work, but some work needed to be done to get to that point. We are thankful for Councillor Howard being able to move that amendment. But the fact is that we're back to this situation where we're giving leave to the legal officer to deal with we're handing over a mess basically to the legal officer to sort out for us. And ultimately, we should be in a position where this is all written out, that we can all read it, we can all understand it, we can vote on it, and it can go through. So all I'm trying to say is, can we do better next time? And that's the point I just wanted to make. Thank you.
Agreed, Mr Mayor. We agreed. Agreed. I know somebody else was talking. We're agreed, I think.
You've indicated no? No.
Is this agreed?
Is this agreed? Yeah. Okay. Where are we up to now? Agenda item 13D, revised political proportionality and committee seat allocation. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
I will move said recommendations as printed, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor Coles, would you second the recommendations and either speak now or reserve your right to speak in the later debate?
I would, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Agreed? I think we're all agreed,
Can I
Mr.
call
Mayor.
upon any other speakers? No?
I think we're all agreed. Agreed.
Agreed, yeah. Yeah. Agenda item 13E, notification of changes to the executive delegation. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendation?
Happy to move as printed before us tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Coles, would you
ditto.
second the recommendations?
Ditto, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Can I call upon any other speakers?
No.
No.
Is this agreed?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed. Yeah. Thank you. That is the end of tonight's meeting. Thank you for this.
Well done, Mr. Mayor.
So John